lane, finds Cunningham. She got it on a three, and it's a single-digit deficit. Quinterly, Beckers, Lee Rue, Maddie Segrist, Hines.
The small sneakers were worn down nearly to nothing, the soles thinning like paper, mud crusted into every crevice, the sides splitting at the seams as 10-year-old Zara Williams stood quietly at the very back of the swelling crowd outside Wells Fargo Arena in Des Moines, clutching a hand-drawn picture of her hero while tears mixed with the sweat that dripped down her cheeks after the 7-mile walk she had made in the blistering August heat. What no one in that buzzing crowd of several thousand knew. Families in New Jerseys, teenagers taking selfies, children with cold drinks from the concession stand, was that this tiny girl had left her house at 5 o'clock in the morning, slipping through neighborhoods where no child should have to walk alone, especially not in the fragile half-light of dawn. She had started her journey because she had heard on the little kitchen radio that Caitlin Clark would be signing autographs after practice. And something inside her bruised but persistent heart told her she could not bear to miss the chance to meet the woman who had become her source of hope when everything else in her life seemed to crumble like old plaster around her. And how is it possible, one might ask, that a child's pure determination, soft, unpolished, undemanding, can move mountains, touch tired hearts, and remind the rest of us of what it truly means to believe in something larger than ourselves? Zara had been awake since 4:30 a.m., her small fingers carefully folding the drawing she had worked on for 3 weeks straight, using every color in the broken crayon box she had rescued from the community center waste bin. The drawing showed two figures on a basketball court, one tall, powerful, and composed, and one small but fierce, both wearing the same unwavering determination that Zara tried to hold on till very morning when she promised her reflection that today, somehow, would be better. The house was silent except for the soft, labored breathing of her grandmother, Rose, drifting from the bedroom down the narrow hallway. The oxygen machine hummed its familiar rhythm, a mechanical lullaby that had become the soundtrack of their lives since Grandma Rose's emphysema had worsened. The smell of old medicine, wilted dreams, and humid summer air clung to the walls, mixing with the August heat that their broken air conditioner had long given up trying to fight. Zara had heard the announcement about the autograph signing while she stood at the stove, helping her grandmother stir the thin oatmeal they shared each morning. And when the radio presenter said Caitlin's name, a flutter of hope flickered in her chest, a rare feeling she hadn't allowed herself for months. Caitlin Clark, whose poster hung above her bed, whose games she watched on the old television when the antenna was angled just right, would be less than 10 miles from their small, fading house on the east side of Des Moines. But Zara didn't tell her grandmother that she had no way to get there except her own tired feet, no money for a bus ticket, and no adult available to take her because everyone in her world was either working double shifts, lying in bed ill, or had already surrendered to the belief that dreams were luxuries children like Zara weren't meant to chase. So she left a note promising she would be back before supper, filled her old plastic water bottle from the tap, slipped the drawing into her backpack, and began her long walk through streets still clinging to the last cool breath of night. By the time she arrived at the arena, the sun was a merciless flame overhead, burning into her shoulders and drying her lips, and her feet screamed inside the shoes that had been too small for months but were the only pair she owned. The crowd was massive. People with shiny new jerseys, young fans wearing fresh trainers, parents with iced coffees, children fanning themselves dramatically despite having arrived in air-conditioned cars. Zara stayed at the back, too shy to push forward, too small to be seen, too aware of her worn clothes and frayed shoes to do anything but hope that somehow, some way, she would catch even the briefest glimpse of the woman who had become the lighthouse at the edge of her storm. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark had been signing autographs for over an hour, her hand aching, her smile unfalteringly warm despite the oppressive heat, her focus on giving each young fan a moment of genuine connection. But in the middle of her signature, something caught her eye, something that made her pause, blink, and truly look at the crowd. At the very back, partially hidden behind rows of adults, was a small figure who stood differently from the rest. While other children squirmed, stretched, and complained, this little girl stood perfectly still, as though terrified that any movement might cost her the place she had fought so hard to reach. And while others wore spotless trainers and crisp shirts, this child's clothes were worn but lovingly maintained, and her shoes looked like they had traveled across half the state. "Excuse me," Caitlin said softly to her security team, pointing towards the back. Do you see that little girl in the yellow shirt? Make sure she gets up here. What the security guard discovered when he reached Zara would break open the heart of every person who later heard the story. He knelt gently, lowering himself to her height. Hi there. Caitlin Clark wants to meet you. Will you come with me? Zara's eyes widened, shimmering with disbelief, her throat tightening as she tried to speak. She wants to meet me? She whispered at last. Are you sure? I don't have a ticket or anything. I just walked here. The guard blinked. You walked here? He repeated, taking in the shoes, the exhaustion sagging her small shoulders, the faint sway in her stance that suggested she had pushed herself far beyond her limits. Zara nodded slowly, her voice trembling but gaining courage as she told T. The truth she had held inside her chest the whole morning. She explained how she had been saving to buy a ticket to one of Caitlin's games. But then her grandmother fell ill and they needed every last dollar for medicine. But I made her a picture, she said quietly. And I thought, if I could just see her, just for a second, that would be enough.
By Stephanie White. Anchors on the attack, able.
The security guard felt something tighten in his chest as he looked at this small, exhausted child who had walked 7 miles alone in the oppressive heat, who had risked her comfort and safety not for attention, not for reward, but simply for the chance to meet the hero she admired. A child whose only wish was to give, not receive. When he gently guided Zara to the front of the line, the crowd parted instinctively, the way water folds open for something sacred, and suddenly she stood face to face with Caitlin Clark, her hand-drawn picture trembling like a leaf caught in a breeze. Caitlin immediately knelt so she was eye level with her, her voice soft but steady as she asked, I heard you walked here today. Is that true? Zara nodded shyly, overwhelmed by standing inches from the woman who had helped her believe life could be bigger than the world she came from. Yes, ma'am. I left before the sun came up. I didn't want to miss you. Caitlin's heart cracked at the sight of her. Her flushed face, sweat-soaked shirt, collapsing shoes, yet eyes burning with the kind of hope that refuses to be extinguished. How far did you walk, sweetheart? She asked gently. About 7 miles, but it wasn't too bad, Zara added quickly, as though trying not to burden anyone with her struggle. I stopped for water at a gas station, and a nice lady let me use the bathroom, and I brought you this. With hands unsteady from fatigue and excitement, she offered her drawing. 2 figures, one tall and one small, on a basketball court, with the words "Thank you for showing me that dreams can come true" written in careful, hopeful handwriting across the bottom. What Caitlin did next stunned everyone. Instead of signing the picture and sending Zara on her way, she stood tall, placed a protective arm around the girl's shoulders, and addressed the entire crowd with the authority of someone who suddenly understood why she had been led to this moment. Everyone, I want you to meet Zara Williams, she said. This incredible young lady walked 7 miles in this heat to be here today. 7 miles. Not because anyone brought her, but because she brought herself. Silence fell, thick and reverent, as people looked at Zara's worn shoes with new eyes. Then Caitlin added softly, Zara didn't walk 7 miles to meet me. I think I was meant to be here to meet her. She's just shown every one of us what real determination looks like. And then came the promise that would change Zara's life. I want you to be my guest at every home game this season, Caitlin said, voice trembling with emotion. And your grandmother too, because anyone who raised someone like you deserves to be celebrated. But she wasn't finished. I'm starting a program called Walk with Purpose, for kids who show the determination you've shown today. Kids who go the extra mile even when the world gives them nothing but obstacles. Over the next hour, Caitlin didn't just sign the drawing. She listened, really listened, to Zara's life. She learned about the daily walks to school because they couldn't afford bus fare, the broken hoop in an empty lot where Zara practiced, the grandmother whose illness had reshaped their lives, and the quiet resilience that held this child together. Do you know what I see when I look at you? Caitlin asked as they shared a bottle of water someone from the crowd had offered. Zara shook her head. I see a champion, Caitlin said, not because of basketball, but because you have a heart that refuses to give up. 6 months later, at the first Walk with Purpose scholarship ceremony, Zara stood beside Caitlin. Not the weary child in worn shoes, but a confident young ambassador whose story had sparked a national movement providing mentorship, transport, and support to children facing hardship. Inspiration doesn't always come from the people we expect, Caitlin told the crowd that night. Sometimes it comes from a 10-year-old girl who walked 7 miles because she believed in something bigger than herself. And when Zara stepped to the microphone in new shoes that finally fit, she said, her voice clear and steady, "I walked 7 miles because I had to, but now I know I would walk 70 if it meant helping another child believe in their dreams." In the end, her journey was never just about meeting a hero. It was about discovering she had been one all along. The security guard felt a sharp pull in his chest as he looked at this small, tired girl who had walked 7 miles alone in the burning heat. A child who had risked her comfort and safety not for attention but simply to meet the hero she admired, asking for nothing except the chance to give her a drawing she had made with all the hope her young heart could carry. When he guided Zara to the front, the crowd instinctively stepped aside, and suddenly she stood face to face with Caitlin Clark, her hand-drawn picture trembling between her fingers. Caitlin immediately knelt to meet her at eye level, her voice warm but laced with concern as she said, "I heard you walked here today. Is that true?" Zara nodded, suddenly shy, her voice barely above a whisper as she explained she had left before sunrise to make sure she didn't miss this moment. Caitlin's heart ached as she took in the sight of her flushed cheeks, sweat-soaked shirt, collapsing shoes, and yet those bright, unwavering eyes that held more determination than many adults she had known. When Zara admitted softly, "About 7 miles, but it wasn't too bad," and shyly offered the drawing she had carried with such care, something shifted in the air around them. The picture, 2 figures on a basketball court with the words "Thank you for showing me that dreams can come true," was more than a drawing. It was a testament to this child's courage and belief. Caitlin rose to her feet, placed a gentle arm around Zara's shoulders and addressed the entire crowd, her voice carrying with a clarity that silenced every conversation around them. "Everyone, this is Zara Williams," she said. "She walked 7 miles in this heat to be here today. 7 miles, not because anyone brought her, but because she brought herself." The crowd